हेलो दोस्तों, आज का हमारा जो टॉपिक है उसका शीर्षक क्या है? फिलॉसफी और विजन ऑफ द इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन। एज यू नो दैट एवरी constitution has its own vision, its own philosophy, and it is conditioned by the situation in which it was being made, and secondly by the historical reason, by the condition of demographic composition, geographical location. All these factors combined together make a constitution and establishes a kind of philosophy unique to it. Similarly, our constitution has also a philosophy, a vision. Students, what do you know about vision? Vision is ability to think or plan for future with imagination and wisdom. It is a strategy, it is a goal, it is an objective that has to be fulfilled in near future. Students, as you know, constitutional laws are the supreme laws of the land. All other laws made by parliament or interpretation by executive or judiciary, all are subordinated to the constitutional laws. But apart from the constitutional laws or legal document, constitution is also a living document. It is embedded with ideology, morality, and a vision that gives us a guidance as to how can we tread on the right path in the future. Today I will discuss important facets of vision of Indian Constitution, and it will include individual justice, freedom, second social justice, respect for diversity and minority rights, secularism, universal suffrage, federalism, and finally national identity. And after the discussion of all these points, we will make a critical analysis of what we have achieved during these periods when we became independent and when the constitution was enforced on 26th January 1950 AD. Friends, as you know, that the first important component of vision of Indian Constitution is individual freedom. If we read fundamental rights, what we find? There are so many articles under fundamental rights which guarantees the right to freedom to our citizen. These are under Article 19, 20, 21 and 22. I will elaborate a few points. First of all, under Article 19, we have 6 rights, that is freedom of speech and expression, and that also includes the freedom of press. Second, to assemble peacefully and without arms. Third, to form association or unions or cooperative societies. Fourth, to move freely throughout the territory of India. And finally, to reside and settle in any part of the territory of India. To practice any profession Finally, to practice any profession or to carry on any occupation, trade or business, the right to acquire property in any part of India has now been deleted, because you might be knowing that the right to property under Article 31 was abolished, and now it has been kept under Article 300A as a legal right. Students, as you know, all these rights are subject to limitations of public order, decency, morality, or in relation to contempt of court, defamation, or incitement to an offense, or our relation with the foreign countries. These are the limitation, and within this limitation, all these 6 types of liberties have been bestowed upon us by the Constitution of India. Similarly, Article 20 gives us right, that is protection in respect of conviction for offences. What does this mean? It gives us guarantee that no person shall be prosecuted and punished for the same offence more than once. If a person has committed a crime and after trial he was acquitted by the trial court, or even after appealing High Court or Supreme Court, he has been exonerated. Now you cannot say no, trial was not conducted fairly, and so the case will be registered on the same subject again. This will be the violation of the rights guaranteed to us under Article 20. And again, no person accused of any offence shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. This is the bulwark of personal freedom. Students, as you may be knowing that when a crime is committed, police tries to collect evidences, and under Section 27 of Evidence Act, it has been empowered to the police officer that in course of investigation, if an accused gives some important information, and on that information if some article is recovered, then it will be admissible in the court of law. Although under Section 25, 26, it is the governing principle that no statement before a police officer will be admissible in the court of law. But there is exception, Section 27 of Evidence Act of India, where if consequent upon the statement given by accused or confession given by accused before a police officer, some article or object used in the offense are recovered by police, then it will be admissible in the court of law. So under Article 20, it has been guaranteed that nobody can be a witness against himself, and this is the bulwark of our personal freedom. Again, this article prohibits the use of ex facto laws passed by the legislature. Ex post facto laws, what does this mean? Suppose a person has committed a crime today and he has been made an accused under Section 307, that is attempt to murder. Now, for the attempt of murder, the punishment is suppose 10 years. And after 6 months, Parliament passes a law, or the state legislature passes a law that in case of attempt to murder, the punishment will be life imprisonment. Now the person who has committed offense today, that he will not be covered by the law passed after the lapse of 6 months when he had committed crime. So in criminal matters, the ex post facto laws will not be applicable, but in civil laws, government or parliament or state legislatures can make laws from back days. There is no bar in matters relating to civil matters. So these three important ingredients under Article 20 gives us important personal freedom, and under Article 21 it says that no person shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty except according to the procedure established by law. Student, what does this mean? What is the meaning of procedure established by law? In America, the word is due process of law. But in India, in our constitution, nowhere the word due process of law has been included. What is the meaning? The meaning of due process of law is that the American Supreme Court or high courts can interpret a law passed by the Congress, state Congress or central Congress even on the basis of rationality, whether the act passed or whether the law made by the Congress is rational or irrational. And on that basis, if American judiciary finds that it lacks rationality or it is not for the good of the American people, it may strike the law null and void. But in our case, Indian judiciary, higher judiciary cannot challenge any law passed by the parliament or state legislature on the basis of rationality, on the basis of usefulness, on the basis of the principle of necessities. Simply, the procedure established by law as included in Article 21 means that whenever a crime is committed, the crime will be registered at a police station which has got the jurisdiction of the area where the commission of crime has taken place, and then that crime will be investigated upon, and after investigation the investigating officer will produce charge sheet in the court of law, and after the trial the accused will be acquitted or convicted according to the proof or evidence against him, and the judgment passed by the lower court can be challenged in the superior court, and if superior court also concur with the judgment of lower court, then the accused will have to go through the punishment awarded by such law court. Students, this is the meaning of the procedure established by law. In ancient days, what we found that in Hindu period or in Muslim period, people were convicted without taking evidence or the adequate or to follow the procedure. The king's dictate was the law, and his dictate was, and he was the final authority to punish anybody. But nowadays, this whims and caprices of monarchical institutions or during the Muslim period, that has been now thrown away. And the English, during the British period, this rule became a unanimous rule, and after the promulgation of the Constitution, under Article 21, it has included that nobody, the life and personal liberty of anybody cannot be taken except on the basis of the procedure established by law. And Article 21A, under Article 21A, the right to education has now been entered into. It has become a compulsory education up to the age of 14 years. Those students, those boys or girls from 6 years to 14 years have access to right to education, compulsory education, and a state is bound to educate them. This is the revolutionary right vested upon us. Again, under Article 22, we have been guaranteed personal freedom because, number one, nobody can be arrested without proper reason. Number one, if a person is arrested, he must be informed on the ground on which he is being arrested. And the arrested person will have the right to consult a legal practitioner. Every person who is detained, who is so detained, will have to be produced before a nearest magistrate within 24 hours of his arrest, excluding the time taken during the journey. This is the biggest check upon the arbitrary power of police, that police cannot keep anybody for more than 24 hours. He will have to produce before a nearest magistrate for taking remand. Students, you know, remands are of two types. One is police remand and second is judicial remand. Police remand is for the interrogation of the accused and collection of evidences, and the judicial remand is for sending the accused to the to the jail. Barring preventive detention, which is also included in Article 22. Article 22 gives us a guarantee of personal freedom, that a person, if arrested, will have to be produced before a nearest magistrate for within 24 hours, excluding the time taken during the journey. Similarly, we have been guaranteed the right to religion, the freedom of religion. What does this mean? Under Article 25, the freedom of conscience and free profession, practice and propagation of one's religion, that has been guaranteed under Article 25. And similarly, freedom to manage religious affairs under Article 26, freedom as to payment of taxes for promotion of any particular religion. Under Article 27, that is, no person shall be compelled to pay any tax, the proceeds of which are especially appropriated in payment of expenses for the promotion or maintenance of any particular religion or religious denomination. And under Article 28, freedom as to attendance at religious instruction or religious worship in certain educational institutions. No religious instructions shall be provided to any educational institute wholly maintained out of their state funds. And under Article 29, no citizen shall be denied admission into any educational institute maintained by the state or receiving aid out of state funds on grounds only of religion, race, caste, language, or any of them. And similarly, under Article 30, right to minority to establish and administer educational institute. All these important articles under fundamental rights have been bestowed upon us to secure personal freedom in matters relating to freedom of expression, our occupation, trade, our residence, our religious faith, and in case if we are arrested for any accusation, the guarantee given to us by the different articles and fundamental rights of our constitution. Students, you see that these are the large number of right to freedom that has been bestowed upon us. The ultimate vision of our constitution is to guarantee the freedom of expression, which also includes the freedom of press, and it has become an integral part of the constitution. As you might be knowing that during the freedom struggle, the Britishers passed Rowlatt Act in 1919, and under this act, Britishers could arrest any person without giving any reason, and our freedom fighters vehemently protested that black laws. Under the Motilal Nehru report, it has been explicitly written that when Constitution of India will be framed, the personal liberty and freedom of every citizen will be guaranteed. So, during the freedom struggle, Indian National Congress was the vanguard to protect the personal freedom of every Indian, and that's why when our constitution was framed, the personal freedom occupied a prominent place in our constitution. Although it is subject to some limitations that I have already told you. Students, the second component of the vision of Indian Constitution is social justice. What does this mean? It means that apart from liberal theory or liberal principle, our constitution makers also gave importance on the social justice and the community values. The scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, women, children, backward classes, they have been given a special protection under Article 15 and 16 of the Constitution. Although under Article 15, there is a clause for the provision of discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. And under Article 16, equality of opportunity in matters of public employment. And Article 17, total abolition of untouchability. And under Article 18, total abolition of titles given by the Britishers to the princely estates, the kings of princely estates, and supporters of British Raj. Now, the titles have been abrogated. Abolition of untouchability has been ensured under Article 17, which has been a bane of our social structure, particularly in Hindu society. But in spite of the principle of equality as given under Article 14, that the state shall not deny to any person equality before law or the equal protection of the law within the territory of India. Now this Article 14 is governed by the rule of law invented by the British Parliament. Students, you know that in spite of the principles of right to equality covering Article 14 to 18, our constitution makers made special provisions for the communities who have been a deprived community for centuries, like scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and backward classes, A special provision for the protection to children and women has also found place under Article 15 and 16. What is this? And these have been under exception. That nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any special provision for women and children. Nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any special provision for the advancement of any socially and educationally backward classes of citizen or for the scheduled caste or scheduled tribe. So, what does this mean? It means that our constitution makers were not satisfied only with the provision of personal liberty and freedom of every Indians, but they wanted that constitution should also be an instrument of social change. It should not be just a legal document, as I have already told you, but it should also be an instrument of social and economic change, economic revolution in our country. Because given the situation, the caste hierarchical society, it was imperative that the constitution makers made a special provision for the advancement of the backward classes, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, women and children. Students, as you know that in certain government services, women have been given reservation. The midday meal plan is all about the better nourishment of children who are reading up to class 8th in middle schools, so that they should blossom mentally and physically both. Similarly, for backward classes, several governments have given a reservation up to 27%. Central government has provided reservation up to 27%. For scheduled caste, there is a provision for 15% reservation, and for scheduled tribe, there is a provision of 7.5% in the central services. And similarly, different state governments also reserve government job for them. Even in matters relating to the election of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, certain seats have been reserved for scheduled caste, and there are 84 seats in Lok Sabha which are reserved for only scheduled caste candidate, and similarly 47 seats are reserved for scheduled tribe candidate who are elected to Lok Sabha. The students, these are the instrument of social justice. Now, another point is respect for diversity and minority rights. The students, in previous class, I told you that there are two ways of national consolidation. What are these? One is assimilation. And second is diversity or diversification. Now, assimilation means to assimilate all types of ethnic groups into one. For example, in Afghanistan, there are 42% people who are Pashtun. They are in majority, although they have not crossed 50%. And in addition, they are also living in the bordering area of Pakistan and Iran. and they speak a different language called Pashto. But in addition to Pashtun, there are so many other ethnic groups like Hazara who are living in central Afghanistan, like Tajiks who are on the border of Tajikistan, like Uzbeks who are on the border of Uzbekistan, Turks. All these are ethnic groups. Now and you know that now Taliban has captured Kabul, and most of them are from Pashtun ethnic group. Suppose Taliban says that we will cleanse other ethnic group and that no other ethnic group will remain in Afghanistan. They will be driven out. Or if they want to stay in Afghanistan, they will have to follow Pashtun language, Pashtun tribal laws. They will have to merge their identity with the Pashtun. This is called assimilation. In Islamic world or even in Christian world, what we see in medieval period, all other minority groups were driven out or converted into Islam. That was the policy of assimilation, started by Umayyad dynasty and later on Abbasid dynasty. But in India, we have followed the policy of diversity. What does this mean? It means that our constitution gives recognition to the different ethnic group, different linguistic group, different religious group, different minority groups. Constitution gives a special protection to them, as I have already narrated you under Article 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 of fundamental rights. But our constitution wants that out of this diversity, a national consensus should emerge. That we are Indian first. This is called respect for diversity. And as you know, after the commencement of our constitution from 26 January 1950, the first linguistic state was formed out from the Madras state, and Andhra Pradesh, the state of Andhra Pradesh, came into being in 1953 on the basis of language, because Andhra people spoke or still speaks Telugu language, and Tamils and other Tamil Nadu residents people speak Tamil language, and on the basis of, and later on so many states were carved out on the basis of language. Similarly, on the basis of ethnicity, so many states have been carved out at the north eastern areas like Mizoram, like Manipur, like Meghalaya, like Nagaland. All these states have been formed out on the basis of ethnicity to give them more power and self-contentment. There would have been another strategy, and that strategy would have been not to give any recognition to any communities. But this would have been unworkable and undesirable in our country, because you know our country is a country inhabited by multi-linguistic people, multi-ethnic people, multi-religious people, and so our constitution makers made a balance between the personal freedom and the diversity. Personal freedom of an individual and the existence of or the ethos of the communities, like religious communities, ethnic communities, linguistic communities, tribal communities, so many communities are in our country, and so they just wanted to have a balance between the individual freedom and existence of different communities in India. And that's why our constitution makers did not follow the rules of assimilation, but they focused upon the principle of diversity. This is another philosophy of our constitution. Friends, another important component of our constitution is secularism. What do you know by secularism? It means that the secularism means mutual exclusion of a state and religion in order to protect values such as individual freedom and citizenship rights of individuals. Secularism means mutual exclusion of a state and religion in order to protect values such as individual freedom and citizenship rights of individuals. It means, number one, the state will have no religion. Number two, whenever grants are made by the state, it will not discriminate between religion and religion. For example, it cannot say that this is a institution maintained by Muslim or this institution is maintained by Parsi or Hindu. So there cannot be any discrimination between different religious groups in matters relating to grant by the state. Number three, every religious group will have the right to administer their religious institution, as this right has already been given in our constitution under Article 2930. And there will be no taxes, as I have already told you. Freedom as to payment of taxes for promotion of any particular religion. Next is, the state will not do anything for the promotion of any religion. For example, construction of temple. For example, inauguration of mosque. This is not the work of a secular state. No religious instruction shall be provided in any educational institutes wholly maintained out of state funds. So these are the main component of secularism. Students, you know that as I have already told you in the beginning, that when our constitution was being made, there was horror of partition. Lakhs of people became shelterless. More than 10 lakh people were killed. 60 lakh people were uprooted from the place of their living, either side of Hindustan and Pakistan. This was one of the biggest tragedy of the world. Now, in that situation, our constitution was being framed. Friends, I just want to remind you that in 1947, Japanese also framed their constitution, and they have strongly advocated for the peace. They included several times the word peace in their constitution. What does this mean? Because in 1945, there are two cities, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, were bombarded by Americans. Lakhs of people died in that bombardment, and Japanese were forced to surrender. And that was the end of the Second World War. Before the Second World War, Japanese were one of the greatest power of the world. And as you might be knowing, they had captured Manchuria from China. Entire southeastern region were under their control. Southeast Asian region, like from Indonesia to Malaysia, Singapore, all these countries were, colonies were taken over by Japanese from Britishers or other colonial powers. But after the bombardment, what happened? Sanity descended upon their mind. And when they started framing the constitution, they were always reminded the principle of peace. So, in Japanese constitution, we find several allusions of the word peace. In our country, when the country was being divided and when the constitution was being framed, what would have been the natural outcome of our constitution framers? They would have adopted a Hindu state, a religious state like Pakistan, like other neighboring countries, but they stick to the principle of secularism. And considering the historical reason, considering the demographic composition and geographical condition, they adopted the principle of secularism. In our neighbor state, Pakistan is Islamic state, Afghanistan is an Islamic state, Bangladesh also is an Islamic state, Sri Lanka is a Buddhist state, Myanmar is a Buddhist state. What does this mean? It means that the head of the state cannot be a person other than the state religion. A Hindu cannot become president of Pakistan or Bangladesh or Afghanistan. He may be an extraordinary person, he may have great caliber, he may have, his contribution might be more than others, but since he is a Hindu, he cannot be the constitutional head of the state like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka or Myanmar. Now, am I clear? Should I proceed to another point? Another point is universal suffrage. Students, as you know, that after the promulgation of the Constitution of India and in first election which held in 1952, according to our new constitution, everybody was given the right of vote and right to be elected. It was a revolutionary state, considering the fact that the mother of democracy, that is Britain, did not give the right to vote to women up till 1940s. Blacks were denied rights in America, but in our constitution, everybody was given the right to vote, irrespective of the caste, religion, race, place of birth. All kinds of discrimination was removed. This was a revolutionary step, considering the fact that ours have been a hierarchical society, a caste-ridden society as far as Hindus are concerned. Even Muslims were affected by the casteism, and even among Muslims we find two types of Muslim. One is Alaf and second is Alaf Muslim and common Muslims. Those Muslims who have been converted to Islam and Sharif Muslim, and these Sharif Muslims are Pathan, Mughals, Sheikh, Sayyid, those who are descendant of Muhammad Shah. They could not, Sharif Musliman did not, or even today, they do not marry the daughters of Alaf Musliman. So, the kind of hierarchical structure denoted by caste system has also penetrated in different religion like Islam. Islam never give recognition to any kind of caste system or hierarchical system. Everybody is equal in Islam. But in India, this concept has already gone sea change. And now, even a society where feudalism has reigned for so many centuries, where the caste hierarchy was so much manifest, where the concept of high and low birth was so much clear cut, and in spite of all these diversities, in spite of so many problems in our society, particularly Hindu society, we adopted the principle of universal suffrage. Students, you might be knowing that by 1935 Act, only 11% people were given the right to vote. Only those persons who were giving taxes to the British government. What does this mean? The zamindars, talukdars, government officers, or the property class were invested with the right to vote in 1937 election on the basis of the Act, 1935 Act. And now what we find, that after the enforcement of our constitution on 26 January 1950, and in the first election in 1952, universal adult suffrage was bestowed upon each and everybody, provided that he should not be a lunatic, he should not be a bankrupt, he should not be an alien. These are the exceptions. But those persons who are citizens of India, they have been given the right to vote. Any point from anybody? No. This doesn't mean that minority should have ease over majority. It only means that minority should not feel that they are neglected community, that they are living in majoritarian rule where they have no say in the government. So you may see in different democracy, particularly in Europe, that minorities have been given special safeguards. Suppose a segment of people having different ethnicity or religion or language, if they are left out and they are not the part of mainstream politics or mainstream economy or mainstream society, what will happen? There will be the danger of peace and tranquility. And a country who doesn't satisfy its minority will never prosper in its full length. This is the meaning of giving protection to minorities. Am I clear? This doesn't mean that minority will supersede our majority. Majority will rule, no doubt, because after all, democracy is what? It is the game of number, arithmetical number. You see, in Lok Sabha or even Legislative Assembly, the party which has got majority, even by a single vote, it rules. What does this mean? That arithmetic or number plays biggest role in politics, particularly in democracy. But it doesn't mean that you will leave minorities. Minorities will have to be given assurance that they will not be discriminated against. They will have the same power, same privileges, same opportunity as majorities have. This is the general principles that governs the relationship between minority and majority. Now, it might be clear for you, as I think. Now, the second point is, yes, yes, yes. This is a glaring example. You see the Tamilians who under the Tamil Tigers fought against a Sinhalese majority for more than 30 years. And what happened to the economy of Sri Lanka? The different types of terrorists among Tamils sprang up and they started devastating the natural resources, national property on large scale. Thousands and thousands of people belonging to Sinhalese, single ethnic group were butchered, were killed, and that was not good for Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankans were very much disturbed and devastated for 30 years. It was only after the annihilation or the end of Tamil Elam, the concept of Tamil, that now Sri Lanka is on the path of progress. And the kind of the principle of diversity they have adopted, they have given certain rights to Tamilians. Otherwise, what happened? Tamilians thought that they are being left out by the majority Sinhalese, and that's why they evoked the slogan of Tamil Elam. That means Tamil independent country. They wanted a separate country from Sinhalese. And what was the outcome? The outcome was the total devastation. So students, you know that you have to satisfy your minority groups also if you want to prosper by leaps and bounds. If you leave minority and if you do not give them assurance, you will not be safe. The peace and tranquility, law and order will be at stake. You will have to expend large amount of money on police and military arrangement, as Sri Lankan government did for the past 30 years. Now I am switching over to another point, that is federalism. Friends, already I have told you that India is a federal state in a structure. It is federal and it has got unitary bias. I have given a detailed explanation over this concept. But today I am focusing upon certain new thing. And what is this? You know, what do you mean by federal system? What is federalism? Federalism is a type of government, a type of system where 2 or 3 governments are functioning. Like in India. In India, we see that there is central government, there is a state government, and third layer of the government is local government. In America, we find central government and then there are 50 states and 50 governments running in their specific jurisdiction. This is the symmetrical type of federalism. And federalism also presupposes a type of division of power, like in our constitution, where in 7th schedule, there are 3 type of list, like central union list, concurrent list, and a state list. I have already narrated you. There is supremacy of constitution in federal system. There is supremacy of judiciary, because in case of a conflict between union government and the state government, the judiciary, particularly the higher judiciary, in our case Supreme Court, have the original jurisdiction to resolve the disputes arising out of the conflict between central government and state government. These are the specific features of federal system. But friends, in our federal system, certain innovative factors have also been included. And what are these innovative features? Have you read Article 371? Now I am going to explain it. You see, one of the, before going in detail about Article 371, I am just going to explain you another vision of our constitution maker. And what was this? To make the central government or union government stronger than state government. Why? Because of the historical reasons. And what are the historical reasons? As I have already told you, that when we read history of India, what we find? that whenever the central authority weakened, the state unit or the provincial unit, like in Mughal period, like in the modern period, Gupta period, even in Sultanate period, what you find? There is a strong centrifugal force in India. And because of this centrifugal force, whenever the centripetal force, that is union government, becomes weak, the units gets separated and becomes independent from the central authority. And you might have read that at the flagging of the Mughal rule, we see the state of Hyderabad, a state of Awadh, Bengal, all these provinces and Nawabs, although they keep a nominal allegiance with the Mughal emperor, but in all practical purposes, they were independent. So, our constitution makers decided that the constitution, that union government should be stronger vis-a-vis state government, and that's why we find that union list has 104 items or subjects in comparison to the state list where there is only 61 subjects. Earlier in the original constitution there were 66 subjects, and in addition to union list and state list, what we find? There is a provision of concurrent list, and now the total number of that list is 52. In the original constitution it was 47. Now what does this indicate? What is the meaning of concurrent list, which has been borrowed from the Australian constitution? That when a subject is being enacted by state assemblies and by Lok Sabha or parliament, the enactment or the law made by the parliament will supersede over the law made by state legislatures. So this means, and there are other several provisions that I have already narrated you, how there is a unitary bias in our constitution. There is a provision of emergency, there is a provision of all India services, there is a provision of residuary powers for parliament, in contrast to the American constitution where the residuary powers are located in state legislatures. Now, so another vision of our constitution maker is that the union government should be a strong government to deal with any situation effectively and efficiently. Students, now I am going to switch over to federalism. What is this federalism? What is unique about it? Now, you might be knowing about Article 371. Before proceeding to Article 371, I just want to include one thing. You know the provision of union territories? There are 8 union territories in India. Some union territories have state legislatures, some have not. And they are being administered by chief administrators without having any state legislatures. This kind of provision you will not find in true federal state like America. There is no provision of union territories. Now I am switching over to Article 371. What is the meaning of this article? By this article, a special provision has been made for the state of Maharashtra, Gujarat, Manipur, Nagaland, Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh. And those items which have been given under the Article 371, these are the exclusive preserve of the concerning governor of that state, bereft of the Council of Ministers headed by Chief Ministers. That means the Chief Minister and his Council of Ministers have nothing to play any role as far as the Article 371 is concerned. For example, Article 371 says the governor of Maharashtra has a special responsibility to establish separate development boards for Vidarbha, Marathwada and the rest of the state while the governor of Gujarat has similar responsibility in matters relating to Saurashtra, Kutch and rest of Gujarat, and the responsibility covers equitable allocation of funds of development, expenditure and providing facilities for technical education and vocational training to the people inhabiting those areas. Similarly, Article 371A, it relates to Nagaland, and what it says, no law made by Parliament in relation to Naga customary law or procedure, including civil or criminal justice matters or ownership or transfer of land or resources, will apply to Nagaland unless a state assembly passes resolution to that effect. What does it mean? It means when we see that Parliament has got all powers to enact a law, but in matters relating to Nagaland, when there is a matter relates to customary laws or transfer or ownership of land, even the act passed by Parliament will have no effect. It will not be applicable unless it should be that resolution must be passed by the state legislature of Nagaland. This is the special provision. And similarly, Article 371B, it relates to the state of Assam, under which a committee of legislators from the tribal areas was formed to look after the interest of tribals. Under Article 371C, the hill areas of Manipur has been given a special power. Under Article 371D, it gives a special provision belonging to different parts of Andhra Pradesh in public employment and education. In particular, the President can create local cadres in various classes of employment and allot civil posts to specific local cadre only. The President can specify any part of the state as local area for this purpose. Again, under Article 371F, it relates to Sikkim. Students, as you know, that the status of Sikkim was of an associate state. Now, in 1975, this state was merged into India and given a separate identity, separate the position of separate state. And under Article 371F gives a special rights to Sikkim. And what are these? One major objective was to grant protection to existing laws in Sikkim so that they are not declared unconstitutional after being brought under the Constitution of India. Now, those laws which were prevalent before the merger of Sikkim into India, that laws will be protected by the President of India. And in matters relating to protection of those customary laws, the governor of that state will act independently of the Council of Ministers headed by Chief Minister. And similarly, in 371G, it relates to Mizoram. 371H, Arunachal Pradesh. All these provisions, special provisions, are the examples of asymmetrical federalism. What does this mean? Asymmetrical. This means that you will not find such type of the laws governing in a federal state. And this is the unique features of our constitution, where in spite of making our constitution a federal in a structure, it has typical other features which have taken into account the customary laws of different states, the special situation of different ethnic groups residing in different parts of country, their hopes and aspirations are to be met by the implementation of different provisions of constitution, so that they should get into the mainstream of India. Now the last point is national identity. The feeling of oneness, that is, you are Indian first and then you are Tamilian or Bihari or residents of UP. This is the second part of your identity. First part of the primary identity is that we are Indian first. And the constitution has tried its level best that people from all corners of our country, whether they come from majority community or minority community or different ethnic group or linguistic group or religious group, the state shall not discriminate in matters relating to the policy of welfare, the policy of development. So suppose now government has launched Manrega program or midday meal program. Now government has never discriminated that this school is run by certain ethnic group or linguistic group, so we will not provide it the midday meal facilities. Government has different government comes in different state led by different parties. Also in central government you have seen that up to 2014 Congress was ruling this country. Thereafter BJP has come into power and since then they are ruling India for the last 7 years. But in matters related to developmental work or welfare measures, neither Congress nor BJP nor any other party who are in power or were in power in central or state government, they did not do that. What we have saw in Taliban, the Taliban government who ran from 96 to 2001 for 5 years, what we saw that only those persons who are Pashtun were given the important post in the administration. People having different ethnic group, linguistic groups, religious group. In Afghanistan all are Muslims, so religious differentiation on the basis of religion doesn't arise. But other primordial loyalties have played a significant role in the matters related to administration of Afghanistan by Taliban from 1996 to 2001 when American government overthrew them. When our constitution gave adult suffrage to everybody irrespective of the caste, color, creed, ethnicity, what was their objective? They wanted that our people should become a compact group in spite of the fact that they are diverse. Diversity doesn't mean that it should be the different groups should be assimilated. And according to in the word of Vallabhbhai Patel, the then Deputy Prime Minister of India, what he said, that in the long run, it would be in the interest of all to forget that there is anything like majority or minority in this country, and that in India, there is only one community. And what is this community? Indian community. This word I have added, this is Indian community. After all, it is people who decide government at the center and different state. And we are very much lucky that in every 5 years, central government and state governments are changed or they are voted to power. Now it is up to the people to decide where they have to go. Nobody can decide for them. They are the arbiter of their own fate. If for the last 70 years they have been voting different government to power, different party to power. When Indira Gandhi imposed emergency for 2 years, and when she relaxed and conducted election in 1977, people overthrew her in northern India. Why? Because people thought that she has murdered democracy, that certain excess have been committed by government officials during the emergency, and that's why people were arraigned against Srimati Indira Gandhi, who was very much popular. She had won Bangladesh war. She had bifurcated Pakistan into 2 parts. She had won a general election in 1971 with thumping majority, more than 350 seats. She had won in spite of the fact that her party had thrown her. And the stalwarts of Congress party like Nijlingappa, Morarji Desai, Kamraj, they were all arraigned against her. But in spite of the opposition from great stalwarts of Congress party or opposition leaders like George Fernandez, like Charan Singh, she came out victorious in 1971. And in 1972, she waged war against Bangladesh, Pakistan, and a new country was born. It was a great achievement. But when she imposed emergency in 1975, and it remained for 2 years, people became very much aghast, angry. And when emergency was withdrawn and a general election was conducted by her, she was thrown out of the power. And a new dispensation came into majority, and they formed the government under the banner of Janata Party government rule. So it is in the hand of people. Our constitution makers have given an excellent constitution to us. It is up to us to uphold it. We must cherish the excellent principles that has been enshrined in our constitution. And what is this? If you see the vision of our constitution in short, you will find all these visions are included in preamble of the constitution, where liberty, equality, fraternity, justice, political, social and economic, democracy, republic, socialist, secular, all these principles have been included in our preamble. And moreover, we the people of India, what does this mean? This means that this constitution has been made by the people of India. It is not gift of the British Parliament. Although it is a fact that only 11% people had right to vote in provincial assemblies conducted in 1946 under the 1935 Act. And those provincial MLAs elected the members of Constituent Assembly, who later on functioned as Parliament of India. But the fact is that in spite of being elected on a narrow base of electorates, they were the voice of the people, vast majority of people. And Constituent Assembly and its composition reflected the wishes of the people, irrespective of the caste, color, creed, religion, or the region. So my answer to your question is that it is up to the people of this country, ancient, which have a excellent heritage. No other country except China can boast of such an excellent heritage like ours. And it is up to us whether we keep our constitutional norms, constitutional provision intact or not. Sharif, these two types of Muslim are not only in Pakistan but also in India today, you know. And Sharifs are, who are Sharifs? There are 4 types of Sharifs. One is Sayyid. Sayyid are, who are Sayyids? Those who are the descendants of Muhammad Sallallahu, the Prophet of Islam. They are called Sayyids. Another category is Sheikh. Those are having the glorious past, like commander, military commander, or noble born, or having held the higher position in the government in Islamic world. They were called Sheikhs, and literally it means leader. Now, second category is another category is Pathan or Afghan, and most of these people come from Afghanistan, and fourth are Mughals. And you know the Mughals, they had come from Central Asia, from Uzbekistan, or who ruled over India for 300 years. So in large chunks, Mughals came into India, and in earlier period they fought against each other, and it was because of the shrewdness of Akbar the Great, who controlled Mughals and finally sidelined them in the administration. Earlier they were controlling the Mughal administration exclusively when they entered into India under the leadership of Babur and Humayun. Now the second category is Alaf, the converted Hindus, Christians, tribals or scheduled castes, Sufi saints, converted them into Islam in large numbers, and in addition several Muslim rulers also compelled Hindus, particularly Rajputs, to get into Islam. There are two types of Muslims, Sharif and Alaf, and there was no intermarry between two. Still no intermarry takes place between two types of Musliman. So you can say that Sharif Muslimans are the privileged class of Musliman, and Alaf Muslimans are commoners, non-privileged. Ahmadiyas are the different religious sect of Islam. Those who are the followers of Ghulam Ahmad, and the Sunni and Shias do not recognize Ahmadiyas as the Muslims. Large number of Ahmadiyas were persecuted by Pakistani Sunni establishments. They are not allowed to enter into the mosque maintained by Sunni or Shia Musliman. Why? Because Ghulam Ahmad told that he is the new prophet of Islam, and in Islam you might be knowing that Muhammad Sahib was the last prophet of Musliman. So Sunni and Shia consider Ahmadiyas, those who are followers of Ghulam Ahmad, as heretics, non-religious person. Okay? Now you are deviating from the original lecture. But yes, they are the resident of Xinjiang province, which borders on the Afghanistan and Pakistan. On the northern side of Afghanistan and Pakistan, there is a province, Chinese province, that is called Xinjiang province, and Uyghur Muslims are resident of Xinjiang province. These Muslims have gone from these countries and Central Asia like Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. The Central Asia, they migrated from Central Asia, Afghanistan, Pakistan to Xinjiang province, and now these communities are in the news because they are being persecuted by Chinese establishment, and because Pakistan and other Central Asian countries which are Muslim dominated countries, they have good rapport with the Chinese government. They are not criticizing the actions taken by Chinese government against the Uyghur Muslims, who are being discriminated on several grounds. This is the situation now prevailing in Xinjiang province in matter related to Uyghur Muslims.